Hi everybody, welcome back to the Master Flow Plumbing YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite new tools that I've discovered about 5 years ago or so. The Milwaukee copper tubing cutter. This is a 12 volt power pipe cutter that I absolutely fell in love with the first time that I used it. Before we get into it though, I'm going to ask you to click that subscribe button in the lower right hand corner down there. Yeah, about 5 years ago I discovered this tool. I think I came across it online. Nobody had told me about it. I actually was just doing a search for plumbing tools. I believe I was on eBay and I seen one of these on there and I was like, and I was very, very skeptical. I was like, okay, I've been a plumber at this point for, nearly 30 years, and as far as I know, there's only one way to cut copper, and that's using copper tubing cutters that are specifically made for that. I'd never seen a power version of one until I actually saw it on eBay for sale, and I went ahead and ordered one that day, and brought it got shipped to me a few days later, and I used it on some jobs and just fell in love with it. It is the greatest thing that ever, as far as I'm concerned, or any plumber that's ever used one, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, literally. So the cool thing about it is it actually cuts 3 different size copper without doing a thing to it. It will cut 1 inch, 3/4, and 1/2 inch without doing a simple or doing anything to it, any kind of adjustments whatsoever. So you got a switch right here that actually reverses it, which will open the jaw back up, and then you have a switch here that'll actually make it rotate just like that. And we'll get into some warnings here, and I'll tell you a story towards the end of the video about that. But to go ahead and cut a piece of 1/2 inch copper, we're going to have it ready, in the cutting position. So we're going to open up that jaw. It simply slides on there. I switch the switch to cut. I rotate it just like that, and that's it. Get it open again, and it's ready to go for the next one. Now, without doing a thing to it, I'm going to cut a piece of 3/4. I'm going to go right to a piece of 3/4 pipe. And as you can see, it's effortless. So there, I just cut a piece of 3/4. Okay, how about 1 inch? Let's go right to 1 inch. We're going to cut a piece of 1 inch. I'm going to go right to it. It's going to do the exact same thing that it did with the other pieces. Takes a little bit longer because it's a bigger diameter pipe, but I mean, other than that, it just does a beautiful job of cutting your copper pipe like that. The other cool thing is it actually does get into some pretty tight spaces. That's what I was probably most skeptical about because of the length of it. I was like, okay, yeah, this thing's not going to be that useful in somebody's home when I'm trying to get up into it between a floor joist to cut off a piece of copper pipe. You'd be amazed. I actually carry a bucket that has my tools all organized in it, when I go in to do some copper work in somebody's home. And honestly, I don't even know where my other tubing cutters are at. I use this so much. I actually do own about 6 of these at this point. I have them in my home shop. I have them in my workshop. I have them in my work truck. And I always make sure I have a spare one on my truck in case one does go down on me. Now, with all the ones that I have owned, Milwaukee makes a pretty good product. I've only ever had one of these go bad on me. And I sent it back to Milwaukee, and they sent me a new one, to replace it, because it was within the first year. I think their warranty is on that, and they covered it. Also, the cutting wheel that is inside of this right there is just a standard cutting wheel that works in like a rigid 100 tubing cutter. So you can replace it. It's a little bit tedious. I've gotten good at it. There's a little E-clip that actually holds a pin in, and then the pin comes out, and then the wheel comes out, and then you just do it in reverse order, and you can replace the wheel on there quite easily. These little 12 volt Milwaukee batteries are amazing. I've got a bunch of them, but you'd be surprised at, you can pretty much, you could be plumbing a new home and using copper, to plumb that new home, all the water lines, and you probably get through an entire day on one battery cutting copper with these. Probably pretty close anyways. They really do hold up well, the battery charges do on them. So I promised you a little, well, here, before we get into that story, one other thing. Let's just say you have a pencil mark on here where you want to cut this, okay, but you want to know right where you can see it. Well, if you look here on the top of this, you can actually see there's a light right there. We could see our mark where we want to cut it, and then we can actually see right where our wheel is going to cut on there. Can you see that with the camera? I think you can, and that's actually a very nice feature on it as well. Okay, so safety. obviously you do not want your finger to get caught in there. I was actually on a job the first year I had one of these, and I'm one of the few plumbers I actually know that still has all 10 fingers, and I'm quite conscientious about safety when it comes to using power tools. And I was actually a friend of the family. Fortunately, I was doing twin water heaters, 250-gallon power vent water heaters side by side. Had just gotten the old ones out of the house, got the new ones in place, and had about an hour or so left to hook them all up and be complete on the job. Well, I needed to trim off the first water line, to go into my dielectric union on top of the water heater. So I brought my cutter in there, just like this, basically. Well, it was a piece of 3/4 pipe, but I will use this for the demonstration. But on top of the water heater, I came in, and there happened to be a wiring harness right there. And I had gloves on because I was working with the copper. And for whatever reason, I became kind of complacent with my safety. And rather than stop what I was doing and try to figure out what to do with that wiring harness that was coming off that blower motor, I decided that I would actually just kind of push my hand like this and move it out of my way so it would not get caught up in this tool. But when I did, somehow or another, I dangled my pinky with that glove on, and it went right into this tool right there. And before I knew it, that thing had gone right around my pinky. Now, you can't tell because I had a great hand surgeon that fixed it, but ultimately it pulled all the flesh off the end of my finger right here, left the fingernail in the bone. It crushed the bone on the end of my finger. I was in a lot of pain. It was total agony, actually. To have a finger smashed and cut up like that, it was just horrible. However, I did stay and finish the job. I obviously took a short break there and got it bandaged up, put my gloves back on. I put 2 gloves on, and actually finished the job. Now, the homeowner was real kind. Again, friend of the family, a dear friend of the family he's been over the years. And, he was more than willing to, drive me to the hospital and let me come back and finish the job later. And I had to chuckle. I was like, well, every time I go to the emergency room, it turns into, an all-day affair. And I knew that it would be, and this would be no different. I knew that I was hurt pretty good. And I knew that, ultimately I'd leave the hospital probably on some painkillers, and I probably should not be doing any plumbing work afterwards. So I stayed and finished the job for about an hour and a half and then drove myself to the hospital. First doctor came in, looked at it, didn't say anything, left the room, comes back in with another doctor. They both look at it. They both leave the room. One doctor comes back in. He's like, "Okay, Tony," he says, "you're going to lose your finger from the middle knuckle down." And he says, "We have a, if you want to, if you got somebody that can drive you to the next town over, which is Ann Arbor, Michigan, to the main hospital," he says, "you can go there and have the procedure done, or we have a hand surgeon that will be here in a couple hours. We can make you comfortable. You can wait for him." So, by grace of God and luck, the hand surgeon shows up. He comes in, looks at it, again, doesn't say anything, leaves, comes back in with the 2 doctors, and kind of chastised these guys a little bit and said, "Here, let me show you how you don't amputate somebody's finger for no reason." He says, "Let me show you guys how you fix this." And miraculously, he put all that flesh back onto the bone right there. He used the fingernails as splint. He stitched it all up, gave me some kind of antibiotic through an IV, and said, it would all be, feeling a lot better in a couple of weeks. And he was right. You can't even really so much as even see a scar. I got a little bit of one down here in the bottom of it, but I'm telling you that story because if you're going to venture out and buy yourself one of these, it is a very unforgiving tool. Now, that surgeon took his job so serious that, he wanted to see the tool afterwards. So I went out to my truck and I got it and I brought it in and I showed it to him. And a good doctor is always going to kind of figure stuff out and figure out why things happen the way they do. I was fortunate that I was cutting a piece of 3/4 copper instead of 1 inch, because what that meant is that there was just that tiny little bit of spring left in that. And had it been a piece of 1 inch that I had been cutting, there would have been no spring left whatsoever, and it would have just taken my finger right off, and it would just ripped it right off. But because there was that give still in this, it's the only reason why I still have my pinky finger today. So that is my glorious review on the Milwaukee 12-volt power tubing cutter, and I absolutely love this tool. I've actually turned a few other plumbers onto them over the years. I think most by this point have one, but you know, they are the greatest thing in the world. I wish I would have had one of these 25 years ago. Maybe my hands and stuff wouldn't ache so much at night. But that's going to conclude today's video on the Milwaukee tubing cutter, and I hope everybody has a great day out there, and remember to keep the hot on the left and the cold on the right. You folks have a great day.